Good day, everyone. Once again, this is Sir Jabin Diguma. We will continue our discussion on the second perspective that defined the self. This is at the sociological perspective. Sociology, or the study of how human society is established, its structure, and how it works. Sociology, therefore, studies people's interaction with each other and the effects they have to one another. This is therefore the very aspect by which sociology becomes an interesting topic and very uh, uh, controversial perspective, in a manner that it has something to say with regards to the development of a person. Since the person is a developing being, then as far as sociological context is concerned, the self is being established, the self becomes a reality according to sociology, based on social structures. And this could give us a better understanding, an undeniable understanding of who we are, and provides reason how our interaction can affect us as a person. This is very true, no? Insofar as sociologists are concerned. Sociologists are concerned with questions about the person in the community. For example, they ask questions like, how does society influence you? How do you affect society? More importantly, who are you as a person in the community? It is in this context that sociology points and posits that socially formed norms, once again, sociology posits that socially formed norms, beliefs, and values come to exist within the person to a degree where these become natural and normal. Thus, since everybody belongs to a certain society, nobody lived as an island, thus the society helps develop the person's self-identity. And it is in this context that sociological perspective becomes a very interesting, it's a very interesting and also a helpful perspective by which we can further our understanding of the self. One proponent, which is being heavily emphasized in this course, is George Herbert Mead and his so-called theory of social self. Herbert Mead was a sociologist. He's an American sociologist from the late 1800s. He is well regarded for his theory on social self. He's even considered as the father of modern American pragmatism. When we say pragmatism, this is a philosophical perspective, it's a paradigm that uh, heavily emphasize on something that at the level of experience, something can exist because it is being experienced by the perceiver of the experience. Mead's work focus on how the self is developed. And his theory is based on the perspective that the self is a product of social interaction. So this is where Mead's social self becomes a prominent theory, sociological theory that again looks into the construction of the self. How is the self being developed? So once again, the theory of Mead focuses on how the self is developed. His theory is based again on the perspective of social interaction, as the self is a product of social interaction, as well as the internalization of the external views. These external views are coming from the other people. So it's a combination, it's a connobial, a mixture of the external views alongside with one's personal view of the self. And Mead believed the self is not present at birth. Rather, the self is a product of development through social experiences and activities. So in that context, Mead rejected the idea of biological determination because for him, once again, the self is not present at birth. Rather, it is developed over time through social experiences and activities. So through continuously receiving feedback from external views. And this external views refers to the different institutions, different personalities within institutions. For example, we are viewed and receive different feedback, from our family members, from our parents, from our siblings, and this perception, these views, we were able to hear from them, we were able to receive from them, is being accepted by our own personal view also of who we are. No? Kanang nag-abot ba? Mauni ingon nila o mauni ang nahitabo nimo. So na ay shall we say triangulation, na ay validation, and it becomes an experience. So since Mead rejected that there is biology that determined us. By the way, when you say biological determination, it means from birth, the self is already determined. The self is already whole, is something that is there. Once again, he rejected that. For him, the notion of a person with regard to who they are, is a product of development from one social interaction with other people. diri na to makita ang contribution, ang value sa gitawag ng mga mentors, no, sa mga tao nga giidolo nato in the very start of our consciousness, na aware na ta na naatay kauban nga laing tao, no, na pwede na itong maidolo. This may be our parents, this may be the influencers, especially karon, the social media via the internet served as alternative influencers, no? In the absence or yes, in the absence of physical influencers such as our parents and guardians. Mead, let me just read this one. Mead reiterated that the process of establishing the self is through the construction and reconstruction of the idea of who we are as a person during the process of social experience. So, nagpadayon. So, meaning to say, as we grow older, as we encounter different individuals in our lifetime, our perception of the self may change dependent on the construction and reconstruction of who we are. And this is a process, processing. Now, what we can learn from this is that since the self is in a continuous process of evolve, no, of some sort of evolution. So dili di siya ingana ka constant, no, kay mausab siya. Then ato na lang jud na siguraduhon na we will be constructing and continuously reconstructing the self sa butang nga makapamaayo nato. Now, manang importante kayo nga maminaw ta sa criticism sa ubang tao, atong i-apply ang mga butang nga pwede natong mapalambo sa atong kaugalingon. Okay? Now, another interesting concept that Mead purported is the distinction between the I and me, no? The distinction between I and me. And for him, these are the two sides of the self. No? Mead sees the person as an active process. No? As we have mentioned a while ago, since he is the product of social experience, the construction and reconstruction of the self via the notion, the views of others, as well as the view we perceive of ourselves, then it is actively processing in itself. It is not just a mere reflection of the society. Mead further proposing two interactive facets of the self. It's I and me. Let's take a look at the nuances of these terms. Now, ato ang sabton that this is English language, is the use of English language insofar as me, the self could be identified as I or me. No? Ita sa Bisaya, we only have one term for kaugalingon, and that is ako. No? But we'll understand again the self in the context of the English language here. No? Itong sabton, ang kalainan sa I and me, so that we can apply eventually to our Bisaya term, which is ako. So let's get started here. The me, according to Mead, and I have a didactic relationship. I mean to say, they converse, they they uh, they are not separated. Rather, they are inseparable, and they are facets. They are two sides of the self. According to Mead, me, the term me is the product of what the person has learned while interacting with others in the context of an environment. No? It is in this process that we learn behaviors, attitudes, and even expectations. So that me is a product of how people sees the self in me. Okay? That's me according to Mead. No? Si ako nga maoy nakit-an sa ubang tao. This can be well appreciated. Mataga na to ang value, makita na to ang value and kung gamit ta sa Johari's window. If you remember that uh, illustration of Johari's window. Windows, meaning to say mga bintana sa kaugalingon, according to Johari, there are three windows of the self. The window which ang nakakita ang ubang tao sa atua, wala nakahibaw. Another window is kitara ang nakahibaw, ang ubang tao wala. Ikatulo, patas. O inihibawan nimo, mahibawan po sa ubang tao. So here, me, atong samton siya, is at the level of maoy nahibawan sa ubang tao diha nimo. Si ako, ang term nga ako, in the context or in the perception of other people about you. Okay? While I, on the other hand, is that part of the self that is unsocialized and spontaneous. Unsocialized and spontaneous. It is the individual's response to the community's attitude toward the person. So that it is coming from the inside. So more likely, it is a byproduct of your own perception of who you are. You know? Moreover, the I presents impulses and drives, because it's the inside. It's coming from the inside. It enables a person to express individualism and creativity. The I does not blindly follow rules. It understands when to possibly bend or stretch the rules that govern social interaction. Thus, the term I constructs a response based on what has been learned by the me, by the other side of the self, which is me. So in this context, we can see the interaction between these two. According to me, the I is one's response to the established attitude and behavior that the person assumes in reference to their social interaction, while the me are the attitudes and behavior of the persons in reference to their social environment. So kaning duha, perception sa ako, sa kaugalingon, binase sa nagkalain-laing forces, external and internal force. External, this is me, referring to the social environment, ang mga tao ganitanaw nimo. That's the self me. While the self I is something that is coming from the inside. Imuhang pananaw sa imong kaugalingon. Okay? Uga. Bisan sa Bisaya, even if wala tay kalainan nga termino alang sa kaugalingon. Si ako can be viewed either from my own understanding of myself, para nako kinsa ko, ug pwede pod nga si ako is based on unsay nakit-an nga behavior nga atong gimanifest sa ubang tao. Especially when we interact with them. Okay? Now, let's proceed to the stages of self-development. So again, the I and me is in a continuous process of development. Now, and this development partakes three different stages. The preparatory stage, according to Mead, is happened during birth until 2 years old. Then we have the play stage, 2 to 6 years old, and the game stage, 6 to 9 years old. Okay. The preparatory stage is also called as the language formation. According to Mead, during this stage, the infant simply imitates the actions and behaviors of the people in which the infant interacts with, no? Such as the self-development and language intimately tied. Kaya maoy permente niyang naobserbahan. Kaya dyan buhat-buhato, no? Through shared understanding of symbols, gestures, and sounds, language gives the individual the capacity to express oneself while at the same time comprehending what the other people are conveying. It's in this context that one is prepared to finalize the language set for self-development. This is where language, as far as preparation of the determination of what the self must be defined, it's the task of the language, no? Importante kayo aning panahon na ang bata makabaton og iyahang kaugalingong abilidad sa pakigistorya, because it is in the language that we formalize connection. Bawo nimo ang tao nga nakakonek kaniya kung makigistorya sa imuha, no? Usa na ana nga pareha mo language ay gamit. Kaya kung dili, then di dyan makasinabtanay. Okay? Now, after the preparatory stage, the play stage comes next. At this level, individuals role play or assume the perspective of others. Okay? From language formation, now that interaction is being furnished, no? Naka-establish na, then the play stage happened. The play stage happened. This is where we try to assume the perspective of others, no? So in this case, role-playing enables the person to internalize some other people's perspective. Hence, one develops an understanding of how the other people feel about themselves, about others too, in a variety of situations. So, diri mahibaluan sa kaugalingon, nga dili lang siya nagpuyo as siya lang. Rather, there are other existing, there are other existing beings, maybe living and non-living, rational and non-rational things. Okay, so the development of the self in this stage occurs through the preliminary experience that serve as practice for a child. So mo ipagsugod sa bata o interact. Remember, sociologically, the self is built up via how we interact with other people. So interaction is being forged through play stage, this stage. Now, from play, it transformed into a game stage, no? From 6 to 9 years old. It's the final stage of self-development. According to Mead, where according to Mead, it is in this stage that individual is characterized by the ability of the child to recognize the rule of the game and to be able to identify the rule and the rule of other that is playing with them. So more than imitation, there is now acceptance, there is now better and deeper understanding of the different roles we play, we partake in the society, no, in our society. So the game stage is the level where the individual not only internalizes the other people's perspective. No? A person in this particular stage is able to take into account societal rules and adheres to it. According to Mead, the self is developed by understanding the rule, and one must abide by it to win the game or to be successful at any activity. So, uh, as far as sociological perspective, and more importantly, Mead's theory of self-development, it is therefore very important to be very sensitive on our environment, to be very sensitive on the society where we live in, because it is this society that we will interact with, we will live with, and become fruitful and purposeful. No? This in this society we live in, that we see our purpose, why we live. No? Later on, as we grow and fulfill our different tasks, no, our purpose, we cannot but deny that this world that we live is grounded on the notion of whether we need help or we have the ability to help. Take note of that. Kanara jung, I think, one a very important nato na sabton as the boiling point of this conversation. Na diha sa imong pagdako o pagkahibalo nga naay ikaw, you also determine that this ako nga nabuhi needs help. And at the same time, si ako nga nabuhi can help. At mangayo tagtabang ug pwede pud ta motabang. Pangutana, sa unsa man punto hata makatabang? Sa unsang punto hata mangayong tabang? The answer is the level of our professional work. Mga panginahanglanon sa atong society, not just actually at the level of professional work, but the level of career development. So that sociological perspective would ultimately guide us at understanding our purpose and our capability to help others, because the end, we interact with our co-human beings. So that would be all for our um, sociological perspective of the self. Later, I will be posting separate presentation for the essay that you will be building up to culminate this sociological perspective of the self lesson. That will be all. Thank you and God bless.